Are you a DPS player wondering which healer you should try first, or if you should try a healer at all? Well, this is the perfect video for you because today we're going to be talking about the two healers that I think are the absolute best healers to try if you are a DPS player trying healing for the first time. So we'll talk a little bit about those two healers' mechanics that make them more friendly to DPS players, and then also we'll talk a little bit about why you should give healing a try. My name's LBNinja7. I appreciate you clicking on this video. Let's go ahead and get into it. So right at the start of this video, I'll go ahead and tell you guys that the two picks, the two best healers for DPS players to play are Mistweaver Monk and Discipline Priest, and there's very clear reasons why. Now, if you've ever healed before, or if you just know anything about how these classes work, they are considered the two battle healer classes in World of Warcraft. So they do their healing based on how much damage they do. Now, obviously, they have some mechanics that work outside of that purpose, that role, but for the most part, the purpose of these two classes or these two specs is that however much damage they do, they're going to convert that into some amount of healing. So this becomes very appealing to you DPS players because you have already kind of optimized this playstyle. You already maximize your damage. You focus so much on your rotation and optimizing how much damage you can output. Well, that's the same goal as these classes. They are in a way trying to optimize their damage because that would in turn optimize their healing. Now, like I said, both these classes do have some off healing abilities, so abilities that don't necessarily heal through their damage. However, most of their healing does work like that. So I'll go ahead and start explaining how that's the case with Mistweaver Monk. So since this is the class that I main, I will start with this. So they have two ways that they can convert their damage into healing. These are two major ways. If you ever watch a Mistweaver in Mythic Plus, they basically are just DPS players that do damage in green numbers. That's what I like to say. But they have Ancient Teachings, which is a buff that they can apply to themselves by pressing one of two buttons that'll apply it. And then for the next few seconds, whenever they use any of their single target damaging abilities, those abilities will heal 150% now, starting today. That was just buffed. 150% of the damage that they do will be spread and healing to your allies. So if one person needs that healing, if there's only one person in your party that is missing some health, all 150% of that damage will be converted into healing toward that person. Now, if all 5 people need healing, each person will get 30% of that damage as healing. So you can imagine that you are just pressing a lot of damaging buttons. Your Tiger Palm, your Blackout Kick, your Rising Sun Kick, you're cycling those buttons very often because they just cleave a lot of healing. You get so much passive healing while you're just pressing damaging buttons. So it becomes very fluid, and it's almost like you're just playing a DPS spec because of how many damage buttons you're pressing. Now, that's not even mentioning the 4th damaging button in their normal damage rotation. That's Spinning Crane Kick. So if you've ever seen a Windwalker play, they basically just bang their forehead on their keyboard and every single button on their keyboard is bound to Spinning Crane Kick. Well, in some cases, Mistweaver kind of feels like that as well, which is kind of awesome because you're just doing a ton of damage. But how that works is you have a second passive called Awakened Phaeline. So if you remember Phaeline, that was the Night Fae Covenant ability that a lot of the melee specs had back in Shadowlands. Well, Mistweaver's not only kept it, but they have just taken it above and beyond. Blizzard has done a great job recently buffing this ability to where it is now, and it just feels so fluid. We just operate so we become a machine on this Phaeline. So basically how it works is Awakened Phaeline says that all of your Spinning Crane Kick damage is converted into healing on your allies, just like your Ancient Teachings does. However, how it works is it can heal up to 3 party members for 70% of the damage that it does. So what that means is that if you're Spinning Crane Kicking, it'll heal 3 people for 70%, meaning that it'll do in total 210% of the damage that you do with your AoE cleaving ability. It's uncapped, by the way. It's a soft cap, but it's uncapped in terms of just total damage, and it just does so much healing when you're in AoE environment, and you do so much damage, and you don't have to stop pressing that damage button most of the time because it just does so much healing based on how many adds are available for you to cleave off of. So Awakened Phaeline, or just I guess Phaeline in general, also provides some other very valuable buffs to your damaging rotation. So your Tiger Palm, while you're standing on your Fey line, it now strikes twice. So you press that button and it buffs your other abilities, because whenever you blackout kick, however many Tiger Palms you did before that blackout kick will hit an additional time. So if you Tiger Palm once on your Fey line, it'll count as 2 Tiger Palms. And then if you press your blackout kick, it'll hit 3 times. However, while you're on your Fey line, blackout kick is actually buffed. How blackout kick is buffed is now it hits 3 targets. So if you Tiger Palm and then blackout kick, your Tiger Palm will hit twice and your blackout kick will hit 9 times. So you just get so much value. It's so sick. Such a fun spec to play, and I highly recommend it, especially if you're looking for a melee healer. This is the melee healer that I would recommend to you. Not that stupid pink class. Definitely go with Mistweaver. Next up, let's go ahead and put Mistweaver to the side for a little second, and let's go ahead and talk about Discipline Priest. So Discipline Priest is it's always my go-to when I'm not playing my Mistweaver, because it is just a blast to play, and it's very simple. So it works very similarly in that there's a buff that you apply that does add that aspect of your damage converting into healing. But how it works is that you actually have to apply not that buff to yourself, but you have to apply that buff to whoever you want to get healed. So you have a couple of different healing spells that when you press them, they will apply that buff to an ally for a certain amount of time. So if you use your Renew, which is just a small hot that you can apply to an ally, you press that Renew, not only do you add that hot to them, but it will also leave behind an Atonement. Now, Atonement is that mechanic that converts your damage into healing. So any ally that has Atonement on them, whenever you do damage, any amount of spell damage, so basically any damage that's not from like a non-spell source, like maybe a trinket is a good example of something that will not proc your Atonement, but basically any ability that you press that does damage, it will convert 40% of that damage into healing. Now you're probably just coming off of that 150% of Ancient Teachings, 210% of Awakened Phaeline, thinking, wow, 40%, that's not a lot. But you would be wrong, because how it works is it's just 40% per target. So if you hit something for 100,000, you'll have an ally get healed for 40,000. So if you can have that buff on all 5 allies, then you'll do 200,000 healing, or you can do up to 2 times as much damage or as much healing as you did damage, because Atonement works that way. It's a buff and it counts per ally. So it's only 40%. I say only, but really it can add up a ton. And I haven't even mentioned how easily you can apply this to your allies. Basically every single button in your normal rotation is either a button that applies Atonement, or a button that abuses Atonement. So you have your Renew, you have your Flash Heal, you have your Power Word Shield, that are great ways that you can single target apply Atonement to specific individuals, which your Power Word Shield is only a couple second cooldown, and you're basically applying that to the tank whenever it's off cooldown. That way the tank always has Atonement and always has that good shield on. But then you have your other abilities that if you need to use those, like if you need to apply Atonement to one of your DPS or yourself in a pinch, you can just Renew them, you can just Flash Heal them. However, what's really broken is Power Word Radiance. Now, this is a spell that you can have up to 2 charges of, and it does a massive chunk heal. You do have to stand there and cast it for a second, but it does a massive chunk heal to the whole party. But on top of that, it applies Atonement to the whole party. It is a slightly reduced duration, but it's just a way that you can just keep Atonement on your party for forever. It's amazing. You can use 1 per pool basically in a dungeon and just have Atonement on everyone. Then you don't have to press 5 global cooldowns to apply it to everyone. You just press that 1 global cooldown at the start of a pool, and then from then on out you can press all the damage buttons to your little DPS's heart's content. It's just so much fun. And then I haven't even talked about how much damage they do. So you have Purge the Wicked, which is a dot. So think like, it works a lot like Moonfire, like the Druid's ability, but it's literally just a dot that you can apply single target while your tank is pulling a pack, and it lasts a long time. But not only does it just add up a lot of damage and do a lot of damage over its duration, it has a lot of synergy in your kit and can add a lot more damage than just what's listed under the spell's description. So as your tank is pulling, you can apply that, and then once your tank has kind of gathered everything, you can do Power Word Radiance, and then from there you just blast damage with your other abilities. So you have 2 big AoE hits. You have Halo, which basically you send a ring out and it'll heal allies, but damage enemies that it passes through, and it just goes out. It's a pretty big range, so that will do a big chunk of AoE damage. It'll also heal your allies with the actual Halo spell, but any damage that it does, it'll also convert that big AoE damage into healing to your allies with Atonement, so that's sick. But then you also have Holy Nova. Now, Holy Nova is one of my favorite abilities because mages have a very similar ability, especially I think arcane mages, it's an arcane spell. But you basically just pound the ground and do a little AoE circle of damage around yourself, and it kind of doesn't hit hard, but it's spammable. However, it does do, it costs a lot of mana, so you can't just sit there and spam it all day, but it's probably not really worth it to do that. However, they have a talent called Rhapsody that whenever you don't press it, if you just don't press it for a couple seconds, it'll slowly gain stacks. And you can let it get up to 20 stacks, but then once you press that button, you slam the ground so hard and do so much damage and healing to anyone around you, and then that massive chunk of damage, that massive chunk of AoE damage, I should add, is then cleaved onto your allies with Atonement. It's just so sick. You just do so much damage with this spec, and I haven't even gotten into the best part. So they play Shadow Covenant, which is basically you just become this dark squid, as the Disc Priest community has called it recently, but you just become this dark amalgamation, and all of your dark spells, which a lot of your DPS spells are dark spells, and a lot of your dark spells get buffed. They get buffed by 25%. So it's basically like a DPS cooldown. You're now doing 25% more damage with most of your spells. However, some of your light spells, some of your holy spells become dark spells. So now your Halo, which did send out this angelic ring of healing and a little bit of damage, now it's a dark ring. It just shoots out and it does even more damage, even more AoE damage that is converted into then even more healing. Now your Mind Blast, which I didn't even mention, this is just a sick single target smack of an ability that you can cycle, and this is one of the abilities that works with your Purge the Wicked, your dot that you apply. If it hits someone with your dot, it'll do even more damage. That is also a dark ability, so it'll get buffed by your Shadow Covenant. Or I say dark ability, but it's a shadow spell or a holy spell. But then you have Schism, which is just a little dot that you can apply to someone. It's just a little dot. That's all it does. No, it enhances your damage to that target. So your boss damage, already insane, gets even more insane. Your priority damage in pools is disgusting because of Schism. And all of these abilities just stack up so nicely since they're on such low cooldowns. I haven't even mentioned that. I'll get into that later. But you basically just cycle so much damage. And then I'm spending so much time talking about the damage because you just have that ability as a Discipline Priest, because you just press so many damaging buttons and then worry about the healing later because you're just focused on your damage rotation. As long as everyone has Atonement, they should be fine. Don't stand in swirlies. You just press your damage buttons. It's sick. You not only see big damage numbers, but you also see big green numbers. So you get that little brain itch, that brain scratch that we're all so desperately looking for when playing WoW. But then you have Penance, which is such a sick ability. How this ability works is you kind of like channel a couple of little bolts and you just throw a bunch of bolts at either an ally or an enemy. That's the idea behind it. However, you never use this on your allies. You use this for damage always because it does a lot of damage, a ton of damage. There are so many ways to buff how much damage this does that it just gets you so much healing if you don't use it on an ally, which is kind of funny, but it's just how Discipline works. And then, not to mention, it becomes also a shadow spell when you go into your Shadow Covenant, so it does even more damage. So just so much fun. I could go on all day about how much damage this class can do or how much healing you can get from your damage, but those are the core mechanics that make these both battle healers. All right, let's go ahead and talk. Now, look, I know this is the most beautiful infographic you've ever seen. We are on a professional editing software here. I have a graph here. Now, this is typically when you start playing your first healer for the first time. This is typically what your learning curve looks like. You start off clueless, as I did. When I started off with my Resto Druid, I started here. I did no healing, had no idea what buttons to press. That's just where you start. and then you slowly start to ramp up until it starts to click. You feel that click, your rotation starts to make a little sense, and you start to learn a lot about your class through this big learning portion. And then you get up here to where there's not much more to learn. You know, you're doing your 25s, 27s, 28s, 29s. You guys get the gist. It's a learning curve. Let me undo that. Now, normally, like I said, when you start playing your first healer, even if you're coming from like a mage to like a resto druid, you just start here. Healing is just hard. There's a reason why we're always complaining, us healer players. However, if you start with one of these classes, if you start with Disc Priest or starting with Mistweaver Monk, you'll start about here. You just start so much further progressed than you normally would on this learning curve, because you at least have that foundation of I know how to execute a damage rotation. Boom, that's half the battle. Then from then on, you do still have to learn all the healer mechanics. You do have to get very adjusted to healer frames and things like that. But this is, at least you start at a boosted rate because you have skipped all the steps of at least learning how to optimize a damage rotation. And like I said, that just puts you so much further ahead of the curve when starting with these two specs in particular. Now, your biggest concern right now is probably, but I know that healing right now is so focused on your cooldowns, optimizing your cooldown usage. Well, guys, I'm here to tell you that these two specs in particular have some of the lowest cooldowns of any healer. Let me go and show you. So I mentioned Phaeline. This is like what you play around primarily on your Mistweaver Monk. It's a 30-second cooldown, and not to mention every single spell that you press on this ability while you're standing on it will have a chance to reset that, and that chance is doubled with these talents. So it's just, you always have this up. So it's basically like you always have a very powerful active passive ability. I said active passive, but you guys get it. A very powerful ability at your disposal always. Now, Chi-Ji is also another incredible throughput option. It does so much healing, especially once you get this down. I have guides on this on my channel if you want to just jumpstart your way to Mistweaver Monk and playing it at a top level. But it is just so powerful, especially in Mythic Plus environments. And I know it says 3 minutes here, but Gift of the Celestials actually can reduce that down to a minute cooldown. So it's just, you get basically all the power that you need at your fingertips once a minute. It's so powerful. And then Shaylun's Gift has been added since Dragonflight came out. Now this, you'll just basically think of it like this. You spawn a bunch of clouds throughout your combat while you're in combat, and then you can cast Shaylun's Gift, consume them, and just fully top up the whole entire group. If you consume this at 10 stacks, everyone will be almost fully healed. Maybe the tank might not get full heal, but this does a giant chunk of healing. This spell is amazing. And yes, they do take 8 seconds to generate, and you have to wait until you're at 10 stacks to get the full value. However, 1, you can use it before you get to 10 stacks, or 2, you can take Veil of Pride, which you do in Mythic Plus, which just cuts that time in half. So once every 40 seconds, you have just a panic button, top everyone up instantly button. It's amazing. And then you have Revival to fill in those gaps. It's a 3-minute cooldown. It's not that great, but you have these insanely low cooldowns, a minute long cooldown for Chi-Ji. You have Shaylun's Gift once every 40 seconds at max value, just super powerful. And then let's come over to Disc Priest. Disc Priests have Rapture, which is a 1.5 minute cooldown, which just lets you spam boosted power word shields at your party. It's just a fast way to apply Toment, but also you can top up. You can just chunk your tank's health bar with shields if you need to, or the rest of your group, you can just coat them in giant shields. But then there's Shadow Covenant, which I did talk about a lot. It's insane. You just boost all of your damage while also doing a little bit more healing, but that damage is boosted, which then in turn boosts your atonement to basically do 50% of the damage as healing of your normal base damage as healing, because you're doing a quarter more healing. Hopefully that makes sense, or a quarter more damage in your Shadow Covenant. So once every 30 seconds you get this. Now it lasts 7 seconds. So it says, however, you can take a talent to make it last 15 seconds. So you basically have this up. You have your big DPS ability up half the time. It's insane, absolutely disgusting. And then you have Schism, which buffs all of your damage up basically on the same cooldown as Shadow Covenant. You ideally want to line these up primarily. But this class just does so much damage. So many of these talents are taken just to do damage. It's so much fun. I highly recommend it. And then you just have Power Word Barrier. I'm sure if you're coming from a DPS player's perspective, you know what you die to the most, what mechanics just chunk you down. You have no way to get out of it. So as the healer, that's kind of what's fun about picking up a healer for the first time, is learning how to combat that from the other perspective, from the other side of the coin. And Power Word Barrier is just an amazing 3-minute cooldown to do that. Basically just applies a defensive, you guys know how this works. It applies a big bubble, a big dome. Anyone that stands in it basically takes a quarter less damage. It's just amazing. It's such a cool ability, and it helps not just your whole DPS players, your whole party, but it can also just be an extra defensive for your tank, which Discipline Priest has plenty of. So just such a fun spec. Now, the final topic that I want to talk to you guys about these two classes is party frames, or healer frames, you might have heard them be called. So like your Voodoos, your LVUIs, your Grid 2s, whatever you know healers use, or whatever you plan on using as healing for the first time. If these are daunting to you, if you don't use them as a DPS player, which I know a lot of the DPS players in my guild don't even use party frames or raid frames. They just rely on their own health bar and go based on that and just see who all's lying on the floor if they're dead. If you don't really want to start using player frames, basically as a healer you do have to, regardless of what spec you play. However, these two specs in particular kind of use them the least. So when you think of like your Resto Shamans, they have to point at whoever they plan on healing and cast a spell actually targeting that person. Now, obviously these two specs do have spells that do that and do them quite frequently, especially when played at the top level. But when you're first starting off, when you first pick up these classes, you can literally just press Power Word Radiance when you have a charge ready or when you need to apply Atonement, and then just spam DPS. I mean, honestly, you can get away with not casting on a party frame. You can get pretty far with that. And then same with Mistweaver Monk, you can just apply your Phalanx, spinning Crane Kick, and then Rising Sun Kick when it's off cooldown, and you'd be surprised at how far you can get. Now, obviously, I don't recommend that when trying to push, but all I'm trying to say is that these two classes, you can get far while not being completely comfortable with party frames or just healer mechanics in general. Speaking of healer mechanics, both of these classes also have Master Spells, which is just, you guys are probably aware of how disgustingly OP Master Spell is in Dragonflight Season 2, but you guys know that is just a way to swerve mechanics. I mean, if you think of just a great example is Halls of Infusion, those dragons that apply that debuff to your whole group. Now, other healers kind of panic. They kind of have to put on their brown pants during that mechanic because they have to just do a ton of healing to survive it, or to help your group survive it. But Disc Priests, they have Master Spell, they shrug it off. Mistweaver Monks have Revival, which is a Master Spell. It does a Master Spell. They shrug at least one of them off, or at least 2 of the 3 off that are in a row. And then they have some other ways to deal with the third one. But basically, you can just shrug off mechanics like that, and it makes some dungeons just trivial. It makes them honestly so easy. So guys, you guys have heard me plead my case about you trying these healers. I promise you they are so much fun and play very similarly to a DPS spec, especially they are the bridge between DPS and healers. I definitely think so. I guess it's them and augmentation. Now, I'm not saying their support quite yet, but maybe one day, but they play so much like DPS. You press so many DPS spells per healing spell, it's disgusting. So I highly recommend that you try either one of these out. Now, don't think that if you are a melee DPS player, you have to try Mistweaver, and same with being a ranged trying Disc Priest. I promise you, it is just such a unique experience playing both that they are nothing like their counterparts. So Mistweaver is nothing like Windwalker, although they share a lot of the same spells. Guys, I guarantee you will have a blast. Don't think that because either of these specs aren't played often that you should not give them a try. I promise you, they land low, or wherever they land on the tier lists that you probably have seen in your research on what healer spec to play, because of the player base. There are just not a lot of people that play these specs. They're the 2 most fun healers in my opinion, and a lot of other people's opinion, and everyone that I know that swapped from DPS to heals has enjoyed these 2 healers in particular. So guys, go ahead, give them a shot. Let me know how it goes. If you have any questions, definitely bring them to me. I'll be happy to answer them. I do have a Discord down below. If you're just starting your healing journey or thinking about it, I highly recommend it, but also I'm there to guide you guys. I'll help you answer any questions that you guys need. I also have left some very useful links for you guys down below. I do have a beginner's discipline priest guide that I've left down below, and then I have a beginner's Mistweaver monk guide. It's slightly outdated, but only by one mechanic. One number's been changed, but it teaches you everything you need to know about Mistweaver, so definitely check those out. But guys, that's gonna do it for this video. I hope that you give healing a shot, and I hope that you give these two classes a shot, because they are just so much fun. I can only say that so many times. You guys just have to listen to me and just trust me and do it. But thank you so much for watching this video. There are so many videos on YouTube, so it's like eye-opening and life-changing that you guys are actually clicking on my video and showing me support. So thank you so much for all the support you've shown me lately. While you're here, if you like this video, make sure and hit that like button. It lets me know what you guys like to see. And if I've helped you or given you some advice that you plan on using, hit that button, because it makes me feel very special and just lets me know that I at least persuaded one person. But guys, if you are not subscribed, make sure and hit that button, because especially if you're just starting your healing journey, you're going to want to see all the content that I drop on these two specs and how to play either of them, or just optimize them once you start getting further on that learning curve. But every single subscriber matters to me, because I'm getting so close to 3K, and 3K is a lot less than 100K. So when you subscribe to one of those bigger guys, I'm sure they don't even notice, but I notice every single one. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for all the support lately. And guys, that's gonna do it for this video. It was fun to make. This is a topic that I've been wanting to make a video on for quite some time, and I definitely think that these are the hands down best healers for this topic. So let me know what you guys think down below. If you are already one of my healer viewers, I'm interested to see what you guys have to say. But thank you guys once again, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.